Hey, it's Betsy Jordan. I am here with Phil Fraser, and we are having a conversation about his positioning, particularly around coaching versus mentoring as the starting point. Before we get started, though, would you mind introducing yourself and where you're at and what brought us to this conversation today?
Okay, so my name's Phil Fraser. I set up my own business back in 2000. Zero investment, kitchen table startup, myself and my wife, and 18 years later we sold it to a PLC. So we've been through the whole startup growth sale process. I'm now using that experience to help other business owners, and I position myself as a business sounding board, which is sort of, I feel, halfway between business coach and business mentor, and there's lots of reasons why I do that, but I'm sure we'll get into that shortly.
So would you mind going back in time though a little bit, as you were saying that when people started asking you around how to get started or actually asking you for your advice on what you've done, if you could help them, what was your initial reaction to those requests?
Well, I'm one of those people who really enjoys talking about business to people. So, you meet someone on a train or a plane, or you sat by the swimming pool and they go, hey, what game are you in? And somebody might say, I don't know, I make pencils. And most people will go, oh, that's a bit boring. Where I'd go, wow, that's fantastic. How do you do that? How did you get into it? How does that market work? All that sort of thing. So I've always enjoyed talking to people about their businesses. So after I sold my business, various people sort of just naturally started picking my brains and saying, particularly the sale process, what does the sale process look like? How did you feel? What were the ups and downs and all that sort of stuff? And that sort of organically has become what I'm trying to do now. And having done startup, growth, sale, I've done the whole gamut of running your own business and the highs and lows that come with all those. So what I found is most people's businesses, irrelevant to the sector, tend to have the same sort of issues. We use the phrase over here, same bucket, different shit. It's, that's pretty much it.
I have to remember that one. I don't know what it is about the British phrases that are way more fun than American ones. So I'll have to remember that one. So, all right. So it sounds like you had the experience of doing your business, and then what was new for you is helping other people with their businesses. So that's more of the new world for you.
Yeah.
What gave you the confidence to say, all right, I know how to do this. I know how to advise people. Like, how did you get from here to there to say, you know what, I can really advise people? And now you're starting to see that people have the same issues, but how did you make that transition from, I do it myself, I help other people do it?
That's actually a difficult one, because when I came, after I'd sold my business, a friend of mine, well, he's now a friend, but he'd advised me, said, oh, you should be a business mentor. And those of us who've run their own businesses, a lot of us suffer from imposter syndrome. That case of, and mine was quite strong, particularly because my business started as an accident. It was a long story, but it started as an accident. So we said, well, all right, this looks like this might work as a business. Let's see how it goes. And it sort of carried on and carried on and carried on. And during that period, you do tend to get the feeling of, shit, somebody's going to find out we're just making this up. And my defense for that is I do a lot of learning and a lot of reading and a lot of listening, all that sort of stuff. So when I sold my business and somebody said, oh, you should be a mentor, my first reaction was, shit, who am I to tell people what to do? I was just making it up and I didn't get found out. But then talking to people and people coming to me and saying, oh, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? Again, sort of imposter syndrome was, I'd help people and talk them, it happened like this with us, this might help you. People going, wait, say, Phil, that was really helpful. And again, the imposter syndrome sort of kicks in and go, oh, shit, they even believe me now. I think it seems to have helped them. So that's sort of been the journey. And the way I came across you was actually, was almost that imposter syndrome. Was like, shit, I better learn how to do this coaching malarkey properly. I'll try and find somebody who does know what they're talking about. And hey, Betsy Jordan turned up.
That is so funny. This coach, all right, I love the malarkey. I have to keep that one in my lexicon as well.
Sorry.
But what I think is so funny is that your expertise sounds like is that you figure stuff out and you developed expertise, but you were devaluing it because you were figuring it out. You know, like, how did I get to this place where I know how to grow businesses? Like, well, I made 1,000 mistakes and yay me, everybody gets to benefit from those. And that's where the unconscious confidence comes in, is that
Yep.
you must still do that as you continue on and learning this business. You're going to continue to learn that. That is your superpower, is your curiosity. People say, I make pencils, and you're like, wow, that's interesting. That's your superpower. Like, yeah, I'll get in there and I'll figure it out. That's a superpower in itself.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things that have happened since I sold that sort of stick out. One is a very, very old friend of mine I met for a drink, and he was, asking me all about the sale. I mean, he wasn't asking for advice. We were just talking over a beer. And I sort of went through the sale process and lawyers and NDAs and all that sort of stuff. And his reaction was, "Wow, how did you learn all that?" And often when you have knowledge, your immediate response sometimes is, "Well, everybody knows that, don't they?"
Yeah.
You don't realize you've picked it up along the way. And then the second thing that again hit home was, people always talk about targeting and who's your perfect audience and creating avatars and all this sort of stuff. So I sort of fell into the rabbit hole of all of that and said, okay, this is, and drew what I thought was my perfect client. So I targeted them by industry sector, and my business was online, and my background was advertising and marketing, so that was that. And it was the size of my business, and we got it to a turnover of about £2 million. So it wasn't huge. So I thought, okay, we'll call it 3 million tops, because I feel comfortable in that, and I haven't got any bigger than that. My first paid for client, which came through recommendation, and again, this is something you talk about, is speak to your old network first, was somebody in a sector I've never worked in, multi-locational, which I never had. I had one office, and a turnover sort of twice as big as my biggest I ever got. So immediately, that was almost was a wow factor as well, because it was like, hey, I can do this for a bigger company, and it doesn't have to be in a sector that I know. And actually, and I'm still, as I say, I've only been doing this about a year or so I'm still learning. And actually, it's helping me develop that avatar. Actually, it's the nature of the person that becomes the client. And my ideal client avatar now is somebody who is looking to grow their business. Sort of full stop. And people and the first response to that is often, well, surely everybody wants to grow their business. And actually, there are people who don't. There are lots and lots of people who get their business to a certain size and go, fine, I'm happy here. So it becomes self-selecting.
But those businesses aren't going to last. So
I'll tell you, sorry, I'm talking a lot, but I'll tell you a very quick story. I invested in a business a few years ago. It was a friend of my sister's, and she said, speak to my brother, he'll help you. Invested with a couple of other friends and sort of left it, and he got on with it. And then when I sold the business and started doing this business mentoring, I thought, well, first point I should start at is this investment. So did some work with the owner, did that classic, sat down with the team, did a sort of a 360 with the team. They all told me what was right, what was wrong, and pointed the finger at him, and he pointed the finger at them. And so we put a whole strategy together, everybody bought into, delivered it, did, very nice presentation, all that sort of stuff, song and a dance. He's not touched it because he's quite happy where the business is. It's profitable, it's not pulling up any trees, it's not growing, it's ticking along very, very nicely. And that is the counter to my point of the people who come to me and probably come to you and lots of other coaches are people who want to develop and want to improve, and that becomes self-selecting, I think.
In the magical ideal world, so here's my experience around that is there's people who everybody wants to grow. Not everybody's willing to pay the price to grow. So I have many clients who come to me, big corporate clients spend tons of money when I was a consultant, spend a ton of money on growth strategies. But when they recognize like what it will cost them to change, and a lot of it, the cost is not about financial. It's just I have to change my identity. If I was an entrepreneur of a startup and now I'm a top executive of a large growing company, it's a shift of identity. And so usually they eject out at some point because you have to change your identity, in order to be a different kind of person. That's when people hit the resistance. Everybody wants to grow. Not everybody's willing to pay the price of growth. That's where sometimes it's different. I want to comment on a couple things that you're saying, and then we can get into the difference between the mentor, consultant, coach, or what have you. And there's a difference when you advise on process versus content. And when you're advising people on content, on the content of what they're doing. So if you're in advertising and you're talking to someone who's in advertising, you're probably being more of that mentor to them because you're in the same line of business. So you just have more experience than they do. So they're probably a younger version of you. When you advise around process, well, then you're bringing a complementary expertise. Then you're bringing process. So then that's where to comply to anywhere. So you could work in any industry, but it is important to go a little bit more precise. Do you mind if I give like unsolicited advice around the avatar?
Absolutely.
People who want to grow have different reasons for wanting to grow. So you could look at it from a couple different angles. You can look at it from the company size. So a company that's growing from startup to growing is really different than a company going from revitalizing and staying in revitalizing, or going from growing to maturing. You have different issues and different challenges, because a startup to growing is, well, they went from the spaghetti against the wall kind of syndrome and say, all right, now how do I take this one piece of spaghetti and make a business out of it? So how do I set myself up for sustainable and scalable profits? So they're worrying about the systems and, the systems for growth. But if they've already accomplished that, they have a different objective. Once they've got that going, like, well, now I'm good. I want to be number one in my industry. Now I'm ready for that. It's the same thing in the consulting and coaches, the people that I support. When they start off, they just want to, like, I just need to get clients. Like, I got to get something going. Eventually they want stability. Once they get stability, then they want to become like the sought after expert and the thought leader. So there's a progression. So if I were going to give you any tips, I would just say, like, refine it down a little bit, and refine it down to your industry or your industry type that you love. Like, you can do work with everybody, but you don't love everybody equally. When I was consulting, I didn't get really refined, and it was a big mistake for me because I come out of this Disney background. I love hospitality. I grew up in retail. My parents had shoe stores all around Chicago. So I grew up in this retail, customer rich environment. But then I go and work for these manufacturing companies, and I have to like walk the floor. And I'm like, oh, kill me now. Like, I don't want to, like, I have to feign interest in, like, oh my God, you made that, versus, getting sent to resorts, all around the world or something like that. So you kind of picture, like, that's my walk the floor test. If the client, when they want, because they get super excited about introducing you to all the things that they do, if you can be equally as excited, because it's a difference, like, are you equally excited about pencils, or versus like, a technology thing, or, retail, like whatever would make you excited, just get a little bit more precise around that. And also thinking through, like, the person within the organization, who's the most likely buyer. You're going to work with everybody, but some of them, like, if you come out of an advertising background, chances are somebody in the marketing world, marketing sales, somebody with a customer facing kind of relationship are probably a natural fit for you somewhere in your angle in there. So that unsolicited advice, take it early, but that's not the point of this conversation. But I can't help myself, so sorry.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I was talking to my brother-in-law last week, and he owns a manufacturing company, and he was talking about machinery, and I was like, oh my God.
Right.
I totally get your, like, what, and in I was marketing and advertising, and you get the printers, and they show you these machines, and this is an FK27, and you go, wow, and all I'm bothered about is, does the magazine that comes out the other side, is it look all right?
Yeah, right.
Machine and all that stuff.
You have to be like, oh my God, this is so exciting. I love what you're doing. But on the other hand, I have other clients, like my client Dave. He loves that stuff. So he grew up in a very different environment. So he grew up with his dad, like making engineering products in his garage. So, and he's an engineer, like he loves that stuff. So when he pictures walking the floor, like, he's like, oh, really? You can, you're going to go see that? And he would get super excited about it. So it's looking at the fit. One of the
Yeah.
things that I learned at Disney is when you're looking at clients, you're looking for three things. If a client's right for you, it's relevance, timeliness, and fit. So relevance is my expertise relevant for the situation? The timeliness is all around, is this the right time, and will they make the time to do the right work? So that's what you're talking about with clients who are dead serious about change. Sometimes it's just a timing issue. Like, yeah, they're serious, but they're not ready. Like that, there's a readiness factor. And then the fit is, do we mesh with each other? Like, does my values, does my personality, does my interest, like, do we align with one another? And that's sort of like that X factor, because work becomes a whole lot more fun. So when you get into your avatar, I call it archetype, and it's looking a little bit more around, like, how does this personality roll? Like, I have a model in one of my programs that I teach that looks at the four different archetypal families. They're from the work standpoint. So you've got the visionaries, you've got the sages, you've got the caretakers, and you've got the warriors. You're working with everybody when you work with the organization, but some of these personalities are your home base. Like, they love you. Like, when I did work at Disney, sages love me. People who like step by step, and they like that. And so I'm sort of the visionary to the sage. They love me. The warriors, they like me, like, they like my personality, but they don't love everything I talk about, because I make them slow down and I annoy them. One of my clients at Disney used to always say, like, oh, I love you, Betsy, but that strategy stuff you're making us do, it's like, oh my God. But she loves me as a human, but she would probably not, I wouldn't be her cup of tea if she was going to hire me. She should go for somebody else who's more technical, and that's why it's beautiful, is that there's room for all of us at the table, all the consultants and coaches, there's room for all of us.